Hi, we're Option Conservation, and this is the Shoot Room Sessions. Good morning, Fee.
Good morning, Rick.
Welcome to your Shoot Room session.
Thank you.
Very excited about this one. Who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Fiona Milden, and I am Planning and Property Director at OC. Having joined in July, I am now responsible for our built properties across the portfolio.
The beauty is you joined several weeks before you actually joined us. So you were working kind of kindly for nothing until that.
Had a launch.
You did have a run into it, yeah. Can you take us through your career contents page? So what are the chapters that got you from childhood, where you were growing up, uni, career, contents page, high level?
Yeah, I can. So I kind of think about this as me coming back to the natural environment. So I grew up on a third generation tenant farm in South Shropshire, and I loved the natural environment, really, loved everything that went along with living on the farm. And I, after that, did the best of all degrees. I did geography, and I did it in Nottingham.
I think we've had more geographers than anything else on the podcast. Yeah.
And while I was there doing that, I realised that as well as loving the natural world, I was really also fascinated by the built environment. So after I'd finished that, I did a year's conversion course in planning. And
Same uni?
No, I went to Cardiff to do that. And after that, I got my first grad job with a multidisciplinary property consultancy in Birmingham. And I worked on all sorts of projects there. I worked on big town centre regeneration, retail, leisure, but increasingly was doing more and more residential work. And I had the opportunity to move to a house builder doing a lot of strategic land promotion. So taking what was effectively land with no kind of planning status at all, and promoting it over the medium and long term for...
In that context, what does medium and long term mean? What sort of
So, I mean, really, anything from 5 to 20 years. If you've got a site in the green belt that's on the edge of a settlement, it can be a very long time coming before you can get some planning traction on that. But that was really interesting to me because it got me back into, farmers' kitchens, talking about, how this land was going to progress. And I did that for 8 years in my old job, taking the business from sort of regional focus to divisional, and then ultimately managing sort of national group portfolio. But then in the last 2 years, I moved into more of a policy role. So really trying to think about how the business would cope with what the government was proposing around planning reform. And a big part of that was how we would embrace the kind of sustainability agenda that was very much coming, but also addressing, if you like, some of the environmental constraints on development. So thinking about recreational pressure on protected sites, nutrient neutrality, but also looking ahead to how we would deal with biodiversity net gain, which is...
all the things our lovely Prime Minister has obliterated in the past few weeks at the point of recording.
It's a moving feast. But it was that kind of context that then took me back into more of an interest in the natural environment, and particularly in natural capital, which is how I came across OC.
So it's a beautiful segue into, do you remember how we first met and how that first meeting came about?
I do.
Tell us, sorry.
So we first met on site in Leon in Devon, which is our beautiful estate down there, in the context of my old role, where I was looking for solutions to how we might procure B&G units, and OC were in the market thinking about how they could fill part of that role in the market. And we had a lovely walk around the estate and a lovely lunch, and I was lucky to meet probably 5 or 6 of the team, I think, that day.
Had you clocked that I was mentally interviewing you at that point?
No, I don't think I
don't know if I had.
I think we had a really honest conversation about what did B&G really mean and what was it going to create.
Yeah.
And I think, it was really interesting to hear you guys talking about what you were doing. And what I really took out of it was the fact, was the way that you were approaching land acquisition, I think. Because there was a real sense that you wanted to do it with integrity and humility, and that you felt a sense of responsibility for these estates that you were buying, and that was really intriguing, I think.
So that walk was really helpful to me, because I'd kind of seen your meteoric career rise in the previous role, and we knew some of the same people, so I'd heard what you were achieving across Vistry and some of the other companies you'd worked with, but I hadn't heard the backstory of where you'd grown up, the family links to the farm, and the sort of rooted in the nature and natural environment part of it. And when I heard that, I was like, bing, we've got an opportunity here. And it was that walk at Leon that really brought that. So a couple of weeks later, I reached out and said, can we have a conversation? And when I said, what are your thoughts on potentially coming to work with us, what did you think at that point?
I mean, it sounds cheesy, but I think I felt like the stars had aligned a little bit. I felt like my career had taken me back into this place where I had recognised that I'd got this interest in, you know, agriculture, if you like, but just the natural environment in its broadest terms. We're at a place in history where that felt like a really timely and important mission, and you guys were really so passionate about what you were talking about. You know, you believed in the mission, and I think you said the day we met, you know, the world is literally on fire. What am I going to tell my kids that we've done? And I've got young kids, and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, it took me back a little bit.
I haven't shared this video with you yet. At the weekend, I was reading the Lorax to. Have you read that to the kids? So I was reading the Lorax to Emma. For those of you who don't know Dr. Zeus' story out there, and in there, essentially, they're cutting down all the trees to commoditize them and things. And Emma's asking me, well, how are people allowed to do that? So Emma's 7, going, well, that's not okay. You can't cut trees. I'm sorry, sweetie, you can. We need to plant more. And she's saying to me, you need to sort that out. And I'm like, oh, I'll try. And she just looks at me and goes, don't try. I was like, yes, that's it. Don't try, get on with it. And she wants to come and plant trees, and
Really?
They're coming. The government's not coming to save us, but I think our kids are. I think they're going to demand that the world changes in that way. So we found approaching people to help partner with us in working in the built property environment incredibly depressing, because trying to find people who had that genuine connection to looking at land holistically and not either viewing it as how can we exploit this by putting as many houses as possible in this place as quickly as possible. I found it really difficult. What were your experiences of working in that sector?
I think the fact that my background is strategic land is probably helpful. You've got to have a degree of patience in strategic land because you've not only got to be in the right place, but you've got to be at the right time. And I think you also get used to the fact that quite a lot of what happens is dependent on external factors. So there's some political will at the national level, but also local political decision making. But I think, what interested me about the role and about the approach that OC take in general is that, you were talking about being custodians for the long term, this idea that you would acquire an estate and then really understand the baseline and sit with it maybe for a year whilst you built up a strategy to make sure that it was kind of right for the unique kind of context, and that sense of place is so important in terms of any planning justification, because it's got to be sensitive, it's got to be appropriate. And we're at Mornicott today, and I think that's a brilliant example of a farming business that has transitioned and diversified over the years. They've taken traditional buildings, they've really sensitively and beautifully restored them and turned it into ecotourism, and it's a good example, I think, of working with what you've got.
That's why I love doing the podcast here, because philosophically that's what we've done about the building. And there's a book called The Alchemist by Rory Sutherland, who's a marketing guru and psychologist, and he said the most sustainable way you can do anything is by rebranding it, because it changes the perception without physically investing any resources into doing so. So we've changed the shoot room, which had a former life to welcome shooting guests here, to a shoot room for a podcast without changing any of the built structure or environment. We've given it a second chapter of life by reconceiving and reimagining it.
Yeah.
So that segues on to what will property be like in terms of an OC lens. So you've been here a few weeks so far, Max, at the point of recording. What have been some of your reflections on visiting most of the estates now?
Yeah.
In terms of our built footprint, what have you found? What do you think? What have you been happily surprised about? What have you thought? What have you done, Rich, with that one? What stands out?
So I think, in terms of the journey, I saw 8 estates in 4 weeks, which was so useful to kind of get a feel for what the characteristics of each are. And they are all very different, both in terms of location, but also in terms of what's there. I think my overarching takeaway is there is a huge amount of built footprint there already.
Yeah.
A lot of them are actually in quite remote rural areas, but there is some really brilliant
I think
buildings.
we've got 100 buildings total, like, of every kind. So from beautiful manor houses to concrete pads or kennels and things, but 35 to 40 that are houses or properties.
Yeah. So I think in terms of what the business wants to do, which is, provide rural housing, progress ecotourism, there's some really good stuff already happening that gives us an indication of how we can continue that and improve it. But just the amount of, traditional buildings, modern agricultural buildings that we've got that now don't necessarily have a kind of farming life, but are there in the landscape as an opportunity to kind of be brought back into a productive use is brilliant. Some of those are more sensitive than others. Leon, that we talked about earlier, is a good example. It's in the national park. Ecologically, it's very sensitive. It will take,
Socially, it's very sensitive. And
it's very sensitive. Right through to places like Shropham, which is a new acquisition, but is right on the edge of a village. So in sustainability terms, gives us a really different dynamic in terms of being able to support and sustain the services there. So there's a lot to be getting on with, and I think a huge amount to be going at. So our job now is really to prioritise that and think about where can we have the most impact.
Is there one that you remember walking into and going, wow, this is way more special than I imagined?
I think Swineley, and Swineley's a really tricky one.
Interesting.
Because, it's in the Yorkshire Dales National Park. My previous life was not in the national parks. We wouldn't go there. But there's such a lot of built footprint there. So for anybody who doesn't know, Swineley's probably got, half a dozen derelict, big, beautiful stone barns on it. And you just look at it and you think, notwithstanding that it's, somewhat remote, that there is still life in those buildings, and I'd love to see something done with them.
Yeah, so I thought you were going to say Hartscarf Farmhouse.
Oh, well, that's...
Because I remember walking in there with you and you were like, this is brilliant.
But they've all kind of done that to me to a
Yeah.
degree, because, to come in not knowing very much about them at all, and to then suddenly be walking around with your team who are so invested in them, and people have heard on the other podcast that you call yourselves custodians of those. Everybody is so enthused by what you can do. And my job, I think, now is to make sure that whatever we do with the property fits with the wider aspirations for the estate.
One of the things that's been running through so many things we're doing at the moment, so we're just over 2 years old as a company at the time of recording. The reason I keep saying at the time of recording is we don't fully know what order we're going to release these in, so or when it's going to fly. But it's the time domain on things. So you mentioning that long term in the land promotion world can be 20 years. In the carbon world, long term is 100 years. Yeah. And we're so used to thinking about things in quarters for like reviews or board meetings or the cadence of financial years, and it's just a moment in a lifetime of a site. And I think we need to keep reminding ourselves of that sort of context. So even between now and 2030, there's both no time at all, but also plenty of opportunity to get stuff done still. Yeah. In terms of OC properties, if we fast forward X years, what does the first iconic, and let's do this in two ways, so let's do new build and retrofit separately. What is an OC property like for you? What does it look like, feel like? Have you got a feel for that yet?
I think based on my understanding of the team's aspiration is that it's somewhat sensitive in how it sits in the landscape, but it's quite ambitious. So it's ambitious in terms of design. It's kind of ambitious in terms of its sustainability credentials and its adaptability in future. And I think, we've talked about kind of design and styling, and we've said, well, actually, you've got to take your cues from the local vernacular and what's around. But I think the overarching theme is that we're doing something long term. And also we are hopefully very clear about the benefits that brings to an area, whether that's, in terms of supporting local services or giving people who are visiting access to the countryside and to these landscapes.
And we've talked a lot about the sort of ongoing energy footprint of buildings and things. And one of the questions we keep coming back to, we're going to do a lot of work on that this year. Those sort of old historic properties, that balance of is the overall best thing to do to drop and replace or to retrofit?
Yeah.
Sitting here today, and we're going to do the work to understand that property by property, do you ever feel which is going to come out on top in terms of performance?
I think it will depend on the state of the building, if you like. So I was looking through a building survey yesterday for Invergeld Lodge, and it's such an impressive property that you feel like you want to retain as much of its kind of integrity as you can. But then by the time you've started to unpick and say, well, actually, you know, it's cold and it's somewhat damp. It needs such a lot doing to it that you think, gosh, it almost might be easier to start again.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is it's historic and it talks to the buildings around it. So I think there'll be horses for courses. And
just on Invergeldy,
yeah,
we've taken people, so we've shown people the site, and they've gone, you need to knock it down and start again from afar. You take them there, they visit, you're like, you cannot lose this place. There's a magic to it. Absolutely. And I think one lens is the energy sustainability part of it. Absolutely, that's such an important lens. But I don't think we can kid ourselves that we're going to solve the climate crisis by retrofitting grade 2 listed farmhouses across the country when we're going to need to build millions of new houses moving forward. Are there things we can do to improve things? And on a cost-benefit analysis, we'll have to look at that. Yes, I think there are.
Yeah.
But that's not the silver bullet that's going to do things. And actually, we need to weigh up, is that funding better spent on acquiring land for the planting of trees and the restoration of the habitat, and accepting that grade 2 listed farmhouses and manor houses offer something culturally and socially and historically that we can't give back in another way?
Yeah.
I wonder, I suppose maybe a paragraph 80 home is almost a cultural offset.
Yeah.
In that we're trying to put something back that offers more for. Could you explain to people what a paragraph 80 property is?
Yeah. So under the current national planning policy framework, there is a clause, if you like, that says generally you wouldn't build a new market home in a remote rural location, because you would expect the majority of homes to be in a more sustainable location, edge of settlement or elsewhere. But what paragraph 80 enables you to do is to say the design and the sustainability of this proposal is so good and so exceptional that it really justifies being in that landscape, but moreover, it brings up the quality of properties there. It kind of sets an innovative bar, if you like, for rural communities. And I think that's an interesting idea, that actually if you get that right and it's so good, it then becomes, you know, part of that landscape and something that somebody else might take cues from for design in 10, 20, 30.
And creates the excitement and the momentum and the continued innovation.
Yeah, and that innovation point is so important, because so many people have said, you know, it's too hard to, you know, get past a certain level of building regs or sustainability, but it's doable. It comes at a price, and the more people that show that it's doable, and the more skills and the more technology we get into the system, the more it's going to come. And
that price isn't just financial, right? It's time, it's energy, it's effort, it's setbacks, it's challenges and frustrations and planning committees that, as we sit here today, we could present the best thing in the world, and it just might not be the right thing for that planning committee. Yeah,
the right thing, and quite often at that time, you know, I think we forget that planning is so inherently political, you know, and over the years we've, you know, in proposals that I've seen before, you know, they've fallen or gone well based on where we are in the election cycle, and that puts us at the moment, I mean us, everybody in planning, in such a difficult position, because the government, with all respect, are all over the place, you know, and that trickles down to local decision making. Everything is very knee-jerk at the moment.
That's very you. That's the very politest way we could have put that. Yeah, abjectly trying to attack the environment on every level. You're not even trying to pretend you're not anymore, are you? Terrible. I'm not happy with. So today's the day they've rolled back BNG now, nutrient neutrality, and decided to announce a new oil field at exactly the same time.
Yes, we haven't seen the announcement yet on BNG, but it's been reported in the BBC that it's being pushed back to next year, which I know some people will say they're not surprised at, but in a way I am, because I felt like it was one of the few things that had time and energy and resource spent on it, and the development and just.
Will your old colleagues be happy today, or will they be frustrated, or what?
I think they'll be frustrated in a way, because I think everyone's spent a lot of time thinking about what are the solutions and trying to kind of get themselves in a position to understand it and plan for it. People who've got short-term projects perhaps aren't that affected, because the understanding was that anything that was in the system before November wouldn't have it retrospectively applied. So there was always going to be a lag period.
Yeah, erased.
But now, today we need the government to say, well, if it's not November, when is it going to be? Because otherwise people lose the ability to plan again.
I think we're going to get largely nothing until the next election. I think we're just going to say, no, we're busy running the country. The heartbreaking one for me was, so Charles Courtney, the Lord of Devon, really awesome guy, knows OC well. I was at an event with him talking about the future of the rural economy, and he said, what we've got in England that's cherished all over the world is our love and protection and passion for the environment. He thinks that can be our next great export internationally. We've got a government saying we don't want to be world leaders in this. Can you imagine Silicon Valley coming, no, we don't want to lead the world in data. No, we want to be bang average. It's just unbelievably short-sighted.
Yeah.
Okay, so pulling us back to OC, what are the biggest, if any, cultural or working differences you've found from PLC house builder to, I was going to choose a load of words to describe OC, innovative startup in the conservation space? What's felt different?
So, most obviously, the size of the organisation. So, there was probably 6,000 people in my old organisation, and I was lucky to be in a senior role, so, got to meet lots of people and got to attend lots of meetings and understand what was going on. But I think the fact that everybody at OC is so plugged into what we're doing. We have a weekly meeting where everyone's involved, everyone hears about the
That was one of the first questions you asked, wasn't it? How transparent are you about stuff?
Yeah.
And I laughed and went,
yeah, I think you told me you were radically transparent, and I thought, okay, great. But you really have been. We had the SPV board meeting a couple of weeks ago, and it's just so interesting for me to see the way that everybody engages with that. I've observed you doing lots of coaching, and it's just really interesting to see how people are going up through the business.
We can expect. So we're very fortunate that we've got the most talented early career professionals coming to work with us. Someone sat in this room. Hey guys, if you're going to invite and try and attract those most talented people, and if you're not going to coach them and give them every opportunity to be brilliant, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So that's what I love about. And the same is true of you and Ellie and George and Chris and the other sort of directors and heads of. It's that every opportunity to coach those people, because that's the future of our business.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting.
And while I'm sitting here, I've got to say it's also the fact that some of the comms have been quite punchy. Do you know what I mean? I've said to you a few times, I've really had to get off the fence about that.
I was hoping you'd raise that. Yeah. I'm just trying to free you up a little bit to speak your mind.
I sort of came in and I was like, I'd been in a place where you kind of you don't want to say anything too provocative, manage expectation, get the tone right for the audience, and everybody's really kind of uncompromising in their views. If something's good, they say it's good. If it's not good enough, they say it's not good enough. I don't know, there's kind of an agility to that, isn't there?
That's the widest smile you've had since we've... I just think it's...
I'm not there yet. I'm still very uptight, but yeah. I can see that the team, because of that, is better, it's more dynamic.
I just think everybody knows, and if you try and do anything but, you lose your authenticity and clarity. And I can't ask people to be brave and honest and challenging about the world around them if I don't do the same thing and role model it. So there has been one bit you've really struggled with in terms of the move across to OC.
What's that?
And that has been the sharing of food.
Sharing of food, yeah.
particularly a certain part of cake, right? This was not your finest hour.
No, I mean, by way of background, let the record hear that I am an only child.
Not prepared to.
And my husband is an only child. So, I mean, there has not been a great culture of sharing in our house. If we're going to share, we like kind of get the ruler out and cut something down the middle. So, yeah, early doors, we were on a side.
You did snap at me when I took the nose off your
Early
cake.
doors, we were in a cafe and you went right in for the centre of my carrot cake. And that was rude.
Cake which I just bought as
Yeah,
well.
you had paid for it.
Yeah.
I was just surprised.
No.
But it was a good lesson for me because, you know, the rest of you are very good. You're all, would you like a piece of this? Would you like to try this? So
That's not true. Katie explicitly sits next to who she wants to eat food from.
that's great tactics.
Yeah, it is great tactic. The final question for all sort of team members we bring into the shoot room is, what does scaling conservation mean to you?
Oh, what does it mean? I think for me, it's the breadth and the kind of holisticness. I don't know if holisticness is a word that you're doing it with. So, you know, scale is one thing, isn't it? But it's not about size necessarily. What I've learned is it's about putting things in the right place at the right time, getting the sequencing of that right so that actually everything is better. You know, we've talked about not just one species, we've talked about kind of what's right and what's the connectivity to neighbouring estates and all of that stuff. So it's about getting the whole play right across a period.
It's why some of my annoying bingo card coaching lines work so perfectly. How you do anything is how you do everything. Yeah. Perfect. That's all the time we've got for the shoot room. Thank you very much, Fee.
Thank you for having me.
Enjoyed that. Have a great day, guys. Bye.